Hello everybody, it's Non-Scene News here, and today we've got a lot of broken dates today, and probably one of the biggest news come today is coming from Africa, where a military operation has just begun. So we've got news that a new war has begun in Africa, where we've got news that Rwandan-backed M23 forces have crossed the border into the Democratic Republic of Congo and captured the city of Goma, and fighting is raging on still. So we got news that the armed group of M23 Rwandan soldiers entered the center of Goma, and the advance risks sparking a border war between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and has intensified a humanitarian crisis in the province. So we've already got news today that Rwanda's advances have been huge, and we've already got news that 288 Romanian mercenaries have already surrendered to Rwanda after crossing from Goma, now under M23 control. So an estimate of 800 Romanians are active in the Democratic Republic of Congo and hired for security as obviously mercenaries. So 288 Romanian soldiers have already been captured by Rwanda. We've already got news that South African peacekeepers in the Goma district is in heavy clashes with the M23 rebels. So if we can see here in your bottom left corner, we can see South African peacekeepers fighting with the M23 rebels. We've already got news today that the South African National Defence Forces have already confirmed 13 confirmed killed in clashes between the M23 rebels in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. So if you can see this video here, we can see the Congolese army withdrawing from the Goma International Airport following the advances of M23 forces. One can easily note the disarray of the government troops on the video, so it seems to be very disorganized, the army of the Republic of Congo, and it's having trouble fighting the M23 rebel group. And the Goma's last positions have already fell to the M23 army, and many government soldiers take refuge in Goma's UN base. It is worth noting that the soldiers who fled the M23 rebel groups were dressed in civilian clothes, reports are stating. And while all of this is happening, the pro M23 media shows the M23 Supreme Commander Willie Ngoma doing a victory lap around Goma in full defiance of United Nations and Congolese government. So the leader of the M23 rebel group did a victory lap in the city, so very big news. And while all of this is happening, we've got news that huge protests have hit the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital city here. So we've got news huge protests have arisen and protested and targeted the embassies of Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Japan, the United States, and France. During the demonstrations, the US diplomatic mission was struck with burning tires, while protesters chanted slogans like "Death to the imperialists." So the unrest stems from a widespread frustration over allegations that the US, among others, have been providing financial support of what a lot of people often refer to as rebels from the March 23 movement, a group accused of destabilizing the region called the M23 rebel group. So the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo seems to have had enough in the capital city and now going on a huge protests, and we've already gotten reports that the Rwandan and the Ugandan embassies were also looted. So we've already got news that a lot of foreign leaders foreign governments have commented on this situation, on this new war between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. So the Belgian foreign minister stated that the capture of Goma is a further and an unacceptable violation of territorial integrity of the DRC. The Belgian foreign minister stated. We had also news that the French foreign minister actually demanded the M23 rebel group withdraw from the territory of the DRC and cease its offensive, which threatens the lives of civilians and peacekeepers. So this was stated by Jean Noel Barrot, which is the French foreign minister. So France is demanding that the Rwandan forces be withdrawn from the city. And the question is now, when will this stop? Will the Rwandan M23 forces stop at Goma? Will they continue its offensive to maybe Nuzulu or something, or Rutok? Will the Rwandan forces cease its offensive or continue, or will it stop and withdraw back from the border? So very interesting news. So it seems that a new war has started in the world between the Congo and Rwanda, and I'll keep you updated on that. We've also gotten some news today coming from Russia, where Vladimir Putin was interviewed, where Putin made a lot of interesting statements, which I'll just go over. So, according to Putin, the war would end in Ukraine in 1.5 to 2 months if Ukraine runs out of sponsorships for money and ammunition, Putin stated. Putin also stated that negotiations are possible with the Ukrainian government, but not with Zelensky. His legitimacy is zero since his term has ended. Ukraine's sovereignty is almost zero. Ukraine just needed to leave the Donetsk-Luhansk regions after February the 24th. Then there would be no war, Putin stated. The West has pursued Ukraine to continue the conflict, and the negotiations with Ukraine are possible after the Ukrainian decree banning negotiations with the Russian Federation is cancelled. We've also got news today that Putin stated that Ukraine deceived Russia to make it withdraw troops from the Kiev offensive in 2022. Russia knew it could be a setup, but decided to try to prevent bloodshed. So Putin is now stating that the offensive to Kiev, the Russian troops withdrew because Ukraine signed a peace deal, which they later apparently ripped up. So this is according to Putin, which he said in this interview here in your bottom left corner. So interesting news. We've also got news today that the general of the Iranian army says that Iran has just acquired Russian-made Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. So it is now official. Russia is now providing Iran with fighter jets. So we've got news that the leader of the Iranian army has stated that Iran has acquired Russian-made Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. And the next news we'll be talking about today is coming from Russia's navy and its fleet. So a new Russian nuclear submarine has joined the northern fleet of the Russian Federation's navy. The Russian Defense Ministry on January the 27th released footage showing the arrival of Russia's fourth generation nuclear powered attack submarine called the Aghansk submarine to its permanent base of deployment with the Russia's northern fleet. So Russia has added yet another submarine into its navy, and it is now in operation mode. So it's officially joined the fleet. So interesting news. We've also gotten some news coming from Ukraine today that President Zelensky of Ukraine arrived in Poland for the events marking the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, of the concentration camp in Poland during the Second World War. So a lot of world leaders were actually invited, including obviously Zelensky, a lot of world leaders, including Germany. So Germany was invited, but Russia was not. So Russia wasn't invited to the liberation of Auschwitz, where a lot of people are kind of very confused because Russia did help with the liberation of Auschwitz, but very interesting news. But on the sidelines of the Auschwitz Liberation Conference, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also held with the President of France, Macron, on the sidelines of the Auschwitz meeting. So, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held a meeting with the French President Macron. The leaders discussed further support for Ukraine with a particular focus on security cooperation. They also explored possible formats for providing security guarantees for both Ukraine and the broader European region. We also had news that Zelensky also met with officials from Poland President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized the importance of Ukraine's military strengthening as a key to achieving a just and lasting peace. He expressed hope for continued support from Poland, particularly through the reinforcement of sanctions against the Russian Federation. This statement was made during a meeting with Marshal of the Sejm of Poland. So, in addition to security matters, the two leaders discussed Ukraine's path to EU membership and the development of border crossing points to facilitate cooperation and connectivity between the two nations of Poland and Ukraine. So, big news. And with these two meetings, we've also got news that France will now deliver Mirage 2005 fighter jets to Ukraine by the end of the first quarter of 2025. This is according to the French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot. So France is now actively pursuing and it's setting a goal to provide Ukraine with at least 5 Mirage 2000 fighter jets to Ukraine by the quarter of 2025. We've also got news today that the Polish company of Mista, Spear has carried out a major overhaul and modernization of 150 BTR-70 armored personnel carriers for an unknown customer. So it is not difficult to guess the customer, and the customer might just be Ukraine, since the Polish ground forces do not and have not had the BTR-70s in service since the 2000s, I believe. So the modernization carried out by the Polish company includes replacing gasoline engines with diesel ones, replacing the gearbox, installing two side doors, and surveillance devices, including thermal imaging and electronic warfare systems. So Poland is now modernizing 150 I believe Soviet-made BTR-70 armored personnel carriers, and it's modernizing them, and it's most likely going to be sent to Ukraine because the Polish army does not use BTRs anymore in its army. So interesting news. We've also got news today coming from Budanov, the chief of the Ukrainian military intelligence. He stated that Ukraine may cease to exist without serious negotiations by summer. So this is coming from the Ukrainian military intelligence chief. And we've also gotten some news today coming from the Crimean Bridge. So we've got news that satellite images of the Crimean Bridge showed that the Russians have completely restored and built additional boom barriers and other protective structures to protect against the Ukrainian naval drones and strikes. So they were reportedly damaged previously by storms, but the Russians have now yet again restored a protective barrier on the Crimean Bridge to stop Ukrainian naval drones from obviously slamming into the pillars and completely collapsing the Crimean Bridge that the Russians have made to connect mainland Russia with Crimea. So interesting news. We've also got some news today that I talked about this yesterday in the previous video, that the Belarusian president of Lukashenko won the re-election with 87.6% of the votes, according to the exit poll of the Belarusian Committee of the Youth Organization. So the president of Lukashenko has yet again won another election with 87% of the votes, and we talked about this a bit yesterday. And we've also got some news coming from the Baltic countries of Lithuania and Estonia. So Lithuania and Estonia have bowed to Trump's pressure and have agreed to spend 5% of their GDP on defense spending. We've also got some news today coming from Moldova that Moldova has just approved a 3 million cubic meter gas loan to Transnistria, which is currently facing a huge energy crisis due to Russian gas being cut off to Transnistria. So Moldova will supply 3 million cubic meters of natural gas to the between to the backed separatist region of Transnistria as a temporary solution to its energy crisis. officials announced on Monday. So the move follows the European Commission's pledge of an emergency assistance package worth 30 million euros or $31 million to Moldova. The funds are intended to help restore electricity and heating in Transnistria over the next 2 weeks. We've also got some news today that Denmark has announced that it will spend $2.1 billion to strengthen its military presence in the Arctic region amid Trump's interest in controlling Greenland, Reuters reports. So Denmark has spent $2.1 billion to strengthen its military around Greenland, with Donald Trump eyeing up the territory. And we've also got news today that France has threatened to send troops to Greenland to avoid giving it to the US. So this was stated by the Foreign Minister of France, Jean-Noël Barrot, after a meeting with the Danish Prime Minister. In an interview with French radio, Barrot, the French Foreign Minister, stated that France has started discussing troop deployment with Denmark. He says that other EU countries are also ready to consider sending troops to Greenland if necessary. The minister added that if Denmark calls for help, France will be there. European borders are sovereign, whether it's north, south, east or west. No one can afford to interfere with our borders, the minister added. So France and many, apparently according to the French Foreign Minister, many other European countries are ready to deploy troops to Greenland to try and deter the Americans of getting Greenland itself. So this is reported by Politico and Reuters, with Denmark investing $2.1 billion into its military. We've also got news today coming from Serbia that Serbia's capital is under protest again. So protesters have blocked Belgrade, the capital city's largest transport hub, vowing to halt traffic for 24 hours. The demonstrations, led by students and opposition groups, have gripped Serbia since November, following the deadly collapse of the railway station roof of Novi Sad. So this exact station here. So we've already got news that's due to this protest. We had reports that the Serbian Prime Minister has resigned, and that was true. So Serbia's Prime Minister has resigned after weeks of anti-corruption protests prompted by the deadly collapse of a train station roof in the north city of Novi Sad last year. So the Prime Minister of Serbia announced his resignation at a press conference on Tuesday, a decision he said that he had made in order to diffuse tensions, he said. And he also stated that the mayor of the Novi Sad region will be also resigning. We've also got news today that Turkey is negotiating a $6 billion defense deal with Saudi Arabia, including warships, tanks and missiles, with potential Saudi involvement in Turkey's KAAN fighter jet program. So in 2023, if we remember, Saudi Arabia signed a deal to purchase advanced AKINCI UAVs from Bayraktar, leading Turkish defense firm. So we've got news that Turkey is negotiating a $6 billion defense deal with Saudi Arabia. We've also got news today coming from Syria that Russian defense equipment has been completely removed from the Tartus military port. So Russian military equipment has been removed from Syria, as satellite images show an empty Tartus port following visits by logistics ships of the Russian Navy of Sparta and Sparta 2 days ago. So previously, dozens of military vehicles were concentrated at the Tartus military port after the most Russian military sites in Syria were forced to be closed. So images from January the 18th and January the 27th reveal that most equipment is gone, coinciding with the departure of Sparta 2. Most of Russia's military equipment has been withdrawn from Syria now, and they might just be used, I don't know, somewhere else, maybe in Ukraine, maybe in peacekeeping positions in Armenia and Azerbaijan, or somewhere else in the world. And we've We've also got news that a high-ranking Russian delegation led by the Deputy Foreign Minister Budanov visits Syria for the first time since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. So a Russian delegation has arrived in Damascus, where they met with the the new Syrian leader. So I'll just go over the key statements between the two officials. So Moscow and Damascus have agreed to continue contracts to strengthen relations and understanding in the field of foreign policy. Russia stated that we are ready to provide the necessary assistance to Syria in the reconstruction phase of the country after the crisis. Russia and Syria expressed during their delegation visit to Damascus their desire to develop cooperation based on the principles of friendship, but the big news today is that the Syrian leader officials asked Russia to pay compensation by handing over Assad al-Bashar, the previous leader of Syria. So a Russian official stated that the talks were generally positive, but there were no progress has been made yet on the fate of Moscow's bases. Well, sorry, not Moscow's bases, the Syrian and Russian relations. And the next news we're going to be talking about today is coming from Israel/Syria, where we've got news that the Israeli defense minister has visited the Israeli gains in Syria. So, if you remember when Assad al-Bashar fell and the HDS rebel group took over all of Syria, Israel just started a buffer zone military operation into Syria, where it captured a lot of territory. So we had news that the Israeli defense minister actually visited Mount Hermon, which is here in Syria, within Israel's military operation, and the Israeli defense minister has stated that the Israeli defense forces will remain indefinitely to ensure Israel's security. So Israel, we've just gotten a complete confirmation that Israel won't be leaving Syrian territory, where we had news that the Syrian leader has demanded the Israeli soldiers to leave. So very big news. So Israel won't be leaving Syrian territory. So big news. We've also got news that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is reportedly set to meet with Donald Trump at the White House next week, marking the first visit by a foreign leader since Trump took office, and I'll keep you updated on that. And the next news we're going to be talking about today is coming from Africa again, where we've got one big news coming from Africa again. So we've got news that Burkina Faso, this African country here, along with Mali and Niger, have withdrawn from the ECOWAS economic alliance of West Africa. So if you don't know what the ECOWAS trade alliance is, it is an economic community in West Africa states called the ECOWAS, and it is a regional political and economic union of 15 countries of West Africa, and is considered one of the pillar regional blocks of the continent. The main goal of ECOWAS is to promote economic cooperation among member states in order to raise living standards and promote economic development. And with that, we've got news that Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have completely withdrawn from the ECOWAS trade agreement, with the effects starting from January the 29th, 2025. We've also got news today that Iran is currently conducting a huge military exercise in the Strait of Hormuz, land and sea and military operations here. So if we can see this video here, we can see Iran conducting huge Strait of Hormuz military exercises in the sea, air and land. So big news. We've also got news today coming from India, that Trump has stressed that India must buy more US weapons, calling for fair trade relationship in a call with Prime Minister of India Modi. The Indian leader is actually expected to visit the White House next month. So Donald Trump is now stating that India shouldn't buy Russian equipment anymore. It should buy American military equipment. We've also gotten some news today coming from New Zealand, where we've gotten news that New Zealand is now cracking down on Israeli visas. So New Zealand is now cracking down on Israeli visas and demanding military service disclosure amid war crime concerns in Gaza. So we've already got news that one ex-Gaza soldier has already been denied entry into New Zealand. So New Zealand is now demanding that Israeli visas disclose their military service, and if they served in Gaza and did bad stuff there, they will not be allowed in New Zealand itself. And now let's head to not Elon Musk. Now let's head to Alaska. So we got news that a US F-35A fighter jet crashed at the Elson Air Force Base in Alaska. So let's just put that in. Elson Air Base here. So we got news that in this exact military airbase here in Alaska, an F-35 fighter jet crashed. So the pilot managed to eject safely and was not injured. The cause of the crash of the F-35 fighter jet is still under investigation, and I'll keep you updated on that. And we've also got some news today coming from Elon Musk, coming from his departure of government efficiency program. So if you remember, obviously Elon Musk is now in the government of the US and is now in an efficiency program where he's trying to save the US money, and we've just gotten an update now. So according to Elon Musk on his X post, Doge, which is the Department of Government Efficiency Program, is saving the federal government approximately $1 billion a day now, mostly from stopping the hiring of people into unnecessary positions and the deletation of the DEI, and stopping improper payments to foreign organizations, all consistent with the president's executive orders. And we've also got some news today that the doomsday clock has moved 1 second closer to midnight, to 89 seconds. So if you don't know what the doomsday clock is, it's a clock counting down seconds, well, it's seconds to nuclear war, so the end of the world. So the doomsday clock has moved 1 second closer to midnight. This is the closest the world has ever come to midnight, said Daniel Holtz, the chairman of the Atomic Scientists. We've also got some news today that Colombia has agreed to accept flights carrying migrants being deported from the United States. So sanctions previously announced by Donald Trump will not go into effect. So yesterday we had, well, in the previous video we talked about how Colombia refused I'm pretty sure 2 deportation flights, and announced that it wouldn't be taking these migrants back. Then Trump announced a 25% tariff on Colombian goods, and now Colombia is now agreeing to accept flights carrying migrants being deported from the United States. So it didn't last too long. And the last news we'll be talking about today is coming from the Gulf of Mexico. So we've got news that Google will now change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America in maps after government updates. So this very map that I'm using will become the Gulf of America here. So Google is now recognizing the new name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. So interesting news, and that's all the news that I've gotten today. I am on Scene News. I'll try and provide you news that the medias around the world do not show you. I do these videos hopefully daily, so consider subscribing and liking. And if you want to join the chat, if you want to support the channel, I've created a donation link where you can personally help me continue to do these videos. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.